Okay, so we'll continue the last paragraph of chapter 4 of the third section of Derech HaShem. Okay, that's page 232. So last time we went over the story of Achav and Tzidkiyahu ben Knano. Right? So the story was that, just to simply run by it, just that the story was that Achav, his wife had Novois, who had a beautiful garden. She had him murdered under a false accusation. Then Achav did some kind of a tshuva, but then King Yehoshaphat, who was the king of Yehuda, came and wanted to make a peace treaty with Achav. Achav says, before we can make a peace treaty, let's go take Ramos HaGilad from the king of Aram. Okay, and then Yehoshaphat says, okay, I will do that if that's going to help us seal a peace treaty. So then he says, okay, but let's first ask God, through prophets, if this is a good thing to do. Then Achav got his 400 prophets. They said, yeah, go for it, you will succeed. Yehoshaphat doesn't trust them. He says, come on, do you have a more reliable Navi here? He says, I do, but he never tells me anything good. Meanwhile, they dispatch to get this Michayo ben Yimla to come in there. He comes, he mocks the prophets of Achav. But he also, when he comes, one of these 400 prophets of Achav, whose name is Tzidkiyahu ben Knano, he takes the prophecy, their prophecy, to a new level, right? He forges these horns of iron, and he says that these are the horns of iron with which you will destroy king of Aram, right? And he uses more stronger language, right? He uses the name of HaShem, a stronger prophetic language than the previous prophets. Michayo ben Yimla says, no, you will die in this battle. And Tzidkiyahu ben Knano slaps him on his face and he says, how would the God's message come from me to you? Meaning I'm the real prophet here, you're nobody. Okay,
But
and
they did win.
No, they lost.
They didn't lose a single soldier. Oh, they lost.
No, they lost, and King Achav died.
He did, but he was the one who was killed.
But they dispersed in all directions. The pasuk they dispersed in all
The
directions.
fact that he stayed in his chariot.
The what?
After he was wounded, he stayed in his chariot, so they don't run. To show the king still there. He actually died on his way home.
Not the way I read it. I don't remember. We're talking about different stories.
I think so.
No, this is.
Was he the only one who killed? Yes, the other guy shot one arrow.
So in the story that the what?
The other king that they went against, he just out of desperation just shoot one arrow, and that arrow happened to hit the king. But he went and he was wounded, but he knew that he could die. They went and run away, so he stayed in his chariot. But actually, they're saying that there was a miracle that none of the Jews were killed. So how can they lose the war if none of them was killed?
Well, okay, let's look it up. Hold on.
It's also not say just one. But
We're about to find out.
But yes, I remember he actually died on way to Shomron, when he was entering the city.
Okay, here's what it says. So, okay, so the king of Israel and Yehoshaphat, the king of Yehuda, then went up to wage war at Ramos Gilad. The king of Israel said to Yehoshaphat, I will disguise myself when I come to the battle, but you wear your royal garment. So the king of Israel disguised himself when he went out to the battle. The king of Aram commanded his 32 chariot commanders, saying, "Do not wage war with anyone weak or strong, but only with the king of Israel himself." It happened that when the chariot of commanders saw Yehoshaphat, they said, "This must be the king of Israel." And they went towards him to fight him. Yehoshaphat cried out. When the chariot commanders realized that he was not the king of Israel, they turned away from him. A man of Aram drew his bow aimlessly, yet hit the king of Israel between the joints of his armor. The king of Israel said to his driver, "Reverse your hand and take me out of the camp, for I am wounded." The war intensified on that day, and the king was propped up in his chariot in the presence of Aram. He died in the evening, the blood of the wound spilling into the bosom of the chariot. The call went out in the camp as the sun was setting, saying, "Every man back to his city and land." The king had died and was brought to Samaria, and they buried the king in Samaria. And the driver rinsed out the chariot, the dogs licked up the king's blood, and whatever, right? That was the prophecy before. And that's it. That's all it says here.
I guess I was reading a midrash or something.
Right? Maybe it was a midrash. I don't know. Okay. Okay, fine. So let's get back to the story. So the story here is that Michayahu said like this. This is the key words over here. It says, "Therefore listen to the word of Hashem. I have seen Hashem sitting upon his throne with all the host of heaven standing by him on his right and on his left," meaning those that are persecutors and those that are defenders. And Hashem said, "Who will lure Achav to go up to war that he may fall in Ramos Gilad?" This one said like this, and this one said like this. Then the spirit came forward and stood before Hashem and said, "I will lure him." And Hashem said, "How?" And the spirit replied, "I will go out and be a spirit of falsehood in the mouths of all of his prophets." And Hashem said, "Go ahead, you will lure him and you will succeed. Go forth and do so." And now behold, Hashem has put a spirit of falsehood in the mouths of all these prophets of yours, for Hashem has decreed evil upon you. So that's what Michayahu said to Achav. Then Tzidkiyahu slapped him and says, "How is it that the spirit of Hashem passed from me to you to speak to you?" Okay? So the question is, the question is really from the Gemara. So the Gemara says, the Gemara in Sanhedrin brings this story. The Gemara talks about prophets that are false prophets that are punishable by death. And one of the example that the Gemara is using is this story of Tzidkiyahu ben Knanon, his being a false prophet, a lying prophet. Okay? So the question is, how do we view this story in, how do we view the story? How do we understand the story? Hashem sent a false spirit. Hashem lied, and Hashem didn't lie. This is prophecy, not prophecy. This is ruach hatuma, ruach. What's happening here? How do we understand this story? Right, with Hashem sitting on the throne, who is going to lure me? Right, it just doesn't flow. Right, agreed? It doesn't flow.
So Hashem removes himself.
Right, it sounds from the Gemara, the way we read the Gemara, it sounds from the Gemara, Hashem says, "You know what, I need this figured out, who's going to do it for me?" Comes the Spirit and says, "Okay, I'm going to do it," and the Gemara says, "Tzei michitzasi, go out from me," meaning like, as if I got nothing to do with this. Like Hashem is like saying, who's going to do this dirty work for me? Like, what's happening here? So, again, so you could have, the Radak, which is what we saw last time, the Radak says that this is really poetic. It's not really, there was no story, there was no gathering of Hashem, and there was no really false spirit. I mean, there is, the prophets are lying, And Hashem is allowing the prophets to lie because he wants to punish Achav. And so this is just a poetic way to express what's happening here. So that's one way out. One way of understanding the story is just saying that there is no spirit of Novice. The point of to say the spirit of Novice is that why does Hashem want to punish Achav for what he did to Novice, right? And he wants him to, just like Mida Keneged Mida, that's what before we discussed, that Mida Keneged Mida, just like Achav had his wife create a false story in order to kill Novice, so to Hashem is using false prophets to create a false story that's going to kill Achav. So it's parallel. But it's not that Hashem is sending a spirit of false prophecy to go and to trick it. No, there's a typical charlatans, right? Hashem is allowing the charlatans to work and allow Achav to get fooled by the charlatans because he wants him to get punished. That's all really that's happening. And okay, that's one simple way to get out of the story. What's another way?
Who's gonna do it? How gonna do it? But the matter about Achav, he put in danger all the soldiers that went to war with him. Yeah. So he didn't do Achav only. Like every single Jew in his army went to war and was put in danger. So he didn't do it to Achav. He did a whole bunch of other people. There's much more than.
So you're asking a question. You're not answering.
No, he said, who's gonna trick Achav to go to war? He said, I'll do it. But he didn't do this Achav. Achav, an entire army, a whole bunch of Jews.
Okay,
Because a whole bunch of Jews got put in danger.
Because of Achav.
No, because of the Spirit. Spirit said, I'm going to take care of Achav. Because of Achav and a whole bunch of innocent people.
Okay.
So
to me, I don't see I don't see the answer here. To me, I hear a question.
No,
I hear questions like you can punish Achav. That's nice. You can punish Achav, but what's the thousands of Jews?
You volunteered to trick the Achav. How come you are also affecting all those people? Like, nobody gave permission to do that.
So how come?
Because you promised to do one thing, but you did that thing plus other things.
Again, I hear you, but it doesn't answer the question. Why is Hashem allowing this to happen?
But is he allowing or is he willing this to happen?
Or whatever you want to say. Even allowing. Why is this?
That's the Midrash came to play. Now the Jews got killed.
Okay.
So he obviously took care of them.
So are the prophets really lying?
Are the
prophets lying on their own accord, on their own account, or is
right? The prophets, it could be again typical forced charlatan prophets that they want to. There's a position of a prophet available. Every king in those days had a prophet, a very very lucrative position, right? So you're the king's psychic, so you gotta come up with the story. You come up with the story. You want to you're trained to tell the king what he wants to hear, and if you don't, there's a slight risk, of course, you run in of getting beheaded. There's a lot of, but it's a risk you're willing to take for a couple of bucks,
Right. Okay.
So one way to explain the story is you have typical charlatan prophets that are, and they have the true prophet, and the true prophet says these guys are a joke, but Achav goes for it anyways.
All right, could it be the other way around? These guys are receiving a true vision that Hashem is downloading into their visionary sunglasses because he wants the whole situation to play out.
That's hard to imagine because then that undermines the whole institution of prophecy, right? And there's no such thing as prophecy anymore. Then prophecy is a joke.
Well, prophecy is a reflection of what Hashem is allowing to flow in.
But then there's no prophecy. If Hashem just says, I will put into your mind the words that you already predisposed yourself to, so then it's not really prophecy. Prophecy means Hashem is going to tell you what's going to be, right? You ask, otherwise there's no point. Otherwise, there's no.
All right, and then the first explanation really applies.
Right. Okay. So now let's see. The Ramchal's version. So the first explanation is easy, is simple, and it's pretty easily. I think the question is possibly stronger. So what about all those people? But again, okay. You know that story, right?
My
You know that story with the,
my
everybody
question-
has.
Yeah, my question is like the literal translation. Like, why he was allowed to do it and he was punished for it. He was allowed to do one thing. He did a whole bunch of other things.
Right. So, right. So it depends how you learn this same this. No, right? Go out of my. So the Maharsha says that in general, if you bring punishment, if any punishment from Hashem comes through you, then you cannot be in the same mechitza, in the same closeness to Hashem.
If you're sticking to that spirit, is the spirit of the person that was killed, if relative is allowed to kill the Rizin,
Right.
he is not obviously
Right. So
allowed
he
to do
talks
the
about
Sodom.
that also, that there is an idea that a spirit is not completely fulfilled, so to speak, satisfied until he gets revenge, justice, until justice is served for his unfair murder, and that is also, that's clearly why he's coming into play. So I should download some of my. I'll just put this on. Sorry. Okay, so let's see Derech HaShem, yeah?
Hmm?
So this is Yudalef, 11. V'hine min haderech hazeh, from this way, hoyo ha'inyan shekoro l'nevi Achav. This is the idea that happened to the prophets of Achav. Beruach shepitom, via the spirit that enticed them. V'zeh, kihine, because behold, mipnei masov, because of his deeds, meaning Achav's deeds, nigzer olav, it was decreed upon him, sheyelech v'yipol b'Ramois Gilad. He has to go and fall in Ramois Gilad. V'hayaroi, and it was proper sheyeloi pitui chazak, that he would have a very strong pitui, a strong enticement. Why? Why would he need a strong enticement? Shall Yoda Yimoshech, that via that enticement he will definitely be pulled by Yelech el milchama hehi, to that war. V'lo yisek mimenu, and he's not going to be pulled back from it. Meaning, even though why do you need a strong enticement? Because there will be things that are going to be preventing him from going, and you need other things that are going to overpower those preventatives. Even though there will occur things that will prevent him from doing it. Which is really what happened. The Yeshafat told him, let's seek the word of God. And it wasn't sufficient for Yeshafat, the prophets of these 400. All of this was already foreseen by God. When the judgment was set up before the heavenly court, there were prosecutors, and then there were also defenders. And there were gathered ideas of how to lure him. And it was decided that this ruach, the concept of this ruach, was the most proper way to entice him. Okay. Because all of those false prophets, they were prophesying before the eyes and the face of Achav. I don't know what that means. Eyes and face of Achav, but okay. Now this is interesting. They were doing actions, and they were making an effort in those type of things that generally pull down the revelation of prophecy. Okay, so that means, just for what offhand is clear, is that a prophecy has to look like a prophecy. I don't know how else to say, right? Meaning, prophecy is not just hey, you know what? God told me just now, don't do this, or God told me do this. There has to be, I don't know how to say it. The guy falls on the floor in
Right, there has to be
seizures,
the-
and all of a sudden the voice says, Achav, or whatever. I don't know what the visual would be, but there clearly has to be some kind of a physical expression of a prophetic experience. Because Achav had to have seen something that says, oh, this is real prophecy over here. This is not just my 400 guys talking. There's a prophetic experience that I see taking place. Okay? And so these guys, these 400 prophets, were doing ma'asim and efforts that usually produce revelation. Vehinehem lo yomistadlim, however, they were not really making an effort, ela lahamshich giloi hatuma, but only to get a revelation of Tuma, not meaning they were trying to prophecy via the dark side, not the side of Hashem. That they were doing this and nothing more. Okay, however, they were tricking the king, umarim loy, and they were showing to him, shemamshichim Gilui Oirei Yisborach, that they are trying to pull down the revelation of Hashem's light. Okay, so again, there is some kind of a difference between actions that you do to connect with the dark side and actions that you do to connect with Hashem. So, meaning, if in the previous chapter, if you remember again, in the last chapter, that talked about breaking free from physical limitations, right? Intellectual, physical limitations, just like it was Zelu Mazeh, everything was parallel, right? So there was, in the way you connect with Hashem was by doing some kind of incantations involving various names of Hashem. And the way you connect with Tuma is by doing some incantations that involve certain names of Tuma, right? So clearly, the prophets of Achav were not sitting there, screaming, Zeus, answer me, what will Achav do in this battle, right? Because Achav would not listen to that. He was, at least on paper, he was a good religious Jew, right? So he would not, they would have to be, again, I don't know how you possibly do that, but they were clearly doing something that looked like holiness on the outside, but was not unholiness on the inside. How do you do that? I have no idea.
Achav was second king.
Right.
The same as the first one. They started. It's like they start praying to like sound everything, but as servants of Hashem. He's the second generation. So you're still praying to the sun.
No, they definitely had Nevi Habal. They had, that was the whole story with Eliyahu Hanavi.
Yeah, but
right, with the Hara Carmel and all of that.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say is that they can still praying to the sun, but they don't pray as a servant of Hashem. They're actually praying to the sun at this point. So at this point, it's
okay. Again, I don't know exactly what the mechanism is. So it's I guess we could speculate, but I have no idea. Anyways, so in any case, they were doing some sort of action some kind of an effort that tries to create what's called hamshacha, to become a conduit, right? Whatever they were doing, they were clearly trying to become a conduit. Whether they were becoming a conduit for Hashem's light or whether they were becoming a conduit for the Tuma, but the key feature seems to be he's stressing is the key feature is that they were doing something that would make them into a conduit, a medium. Okay? And as a result, they were getting the revelation which they were seeking. Okay? They were getting a revelation, just not from the right source. And this thing was being happening in the eyes of before the eyes of the king, liyischazek yoser be'emuno bom, in order so that he will be stronger, have a stronger belief in them. Meaning they could have gone home and said, listen, let us go meditate, and we'll come back to you with our answer. Right? All of this prophetic experience was happening in front of him so that he will be more likely to believe that this is a real prophetic experience. Okay. V'hu shomer kosov, and that's why the pasuk says, V'chol ha-neviim misnabiim lifneihem. Right? Before Yehoshaphat and Achav, the prophets were prophesying, so that they would believe that this is real. Now the thing that was being brought down to them via this defiled prophecy, were these words, Alei v'atzlach, go up and you will succeed, v'nosen Hashem b'yad hamelech, and Hashem will give in the hand of the king. These are the words that this ruach was speaking through their mouths, in their mouths. So they had some kind of an experience, and there was a spirit speaking through them, and the spirit was saying, "Go, and you will succeed." Okay. Now. So the spirit was lying, right? Mm-hmm. Yes? The spirit was lying, correct?
Yep.
Now here, so let's continue. But they themselves were not making an error. Because they knew they knew what they were trying to accomplish. They knew what they were trying to achieve with their effort. Only Achav was kind of falsely believed in them. And he was enticed, he was confused, lured. So much he believed them that he did not no longer believe the words of Michayo. From so much belief in these false prophets of his. Okay. V'amnam, however, so far, even Novos is the spirit that's speaking through these 400 prophets. Through Ruach HaTuma, we have to put the pieces together. V'amnam, we didn't get to Tzidkiyo yet. V'amnam Tzidkiyo ben Knano hoisif al shar neviim haheim. Tzidkiyo ben Knano, he contributed an additional aspect over these prophets. They only said what was given to them via this spirit. However, Tzidkiya, he added actions, actions that would only be usually done by Nevi'ei HaEmes, true prophets. So Tzidkiya, so again, I don't really have the words to explain here, but Tzidkiya did something that would ordinarily be only done by real prophets. And this is Kikvar Haman Begiloyahu. He believed into this revelation. So it sounds like Tzidkiya was so taken by this prophetic experience that he really started believing it to be authentic. Even though they kind of started out going the wrong way, but Tzidkiya felt like this is it, this is the real thing. And he thought that this was honest and truthful. And it was actually emanating from God himself. Now, so far, Tzidkiya is making a mistake, right? Mm-hmm. But then the next word, until he willfully, knowingly said, Koyamar Hashem, this is the word of Hashem. Again, these are much stronger prophetic words. Koyamar Hashem, this is what God is saying. Be'ela, with these horns you will go and gore Aram, right? Mm-hmm. So 1 second. So what just happened? He just said that Tzidkiyahu,
No, he just made up his own
what?
prophecy.
But he just said that Tzidkiyahu believed
He probably,
that this is the real thing.
yeah, he
So
probably,
when did we jump from Tzidkiyahu believing that this was the real thing to Hazid, that he made this, again, the Zodan. Zodan means a willful sin, that he willfully sinned by saying these are the words of God.
no, original statement was that God will deliver into king's hand. You don't specify which king. Some
Right.
king, I get it. So this one, he just made up.
Again, I
completely
hear what
thing.
you're saying. I hear what you're saying. That's what I would have said too. Is that what he's saying?
Yeah.
Do you see that in here, in this text?
It's the second part. You mean
What?
The new prophet that he made up?
Whichever, but how is Ramchal understanding the story? Not how you are understanding the story. How is Ramchal understanding the story? Right?
Yeah.
It seems to me that he's saying the 400 prophets or the 399 prophets knew that they were saying falsehood,
Yeah.
right? Even though they were trying to get revelation, they knew they were getting a revelation from the wrong place, and they knew that this was possibly a false revelation,
Okay.
right?
Regardless, they carried on and delivered.
Right. But they're not the ones who are really blamed over here. The person who's really the Novi Sheker is Tzidkiyahu ben Knano. The way he explains Tzidkiyahu ben Knano is by saying that he was so taken by their prophecy that he thought it was the real thing. So since he thought it was the real thing, then he intentionally sinned. So, but what was the intentional? Where do we jump from his confusion about the truthfulness of this spirit to intentional falsehood?
But
Does
it's
he really
different.
say that it's intentional? Or is
That's
it
the word actually hazid loimer. The word hazid means willful
Hazid,
sinning. B'mezid, right?
But he does the extra action. He brings those horns. He just goes all extra. Was he giving information was a false spirit or not?
Oh,
So
very good.
That was
Right.
That was different.
Right,
Was.
right. So he might have believed.
that this is a real deal?
He might have believed that this is the real deal,
Original, maybe.
but he clearly also has a propaganda, so to speak, in mind. He wants to prove to everybody that this was, meaning he thinks that it's the real deal. Maybe that's not the sin yet. It wouldn't have been the sin, but it's the fact that he makes it a point to go and to make up, these horns and all of these things that he didn't hear, that he didn't get, and he says Koyamar Hashem, all of these, he adds, what's the word? He begins to spin the story to such a degree that the story takes on much bigger
Right, so are we
falsehood.
trying to figure out that he did it intentional? Or could it be just as consequence of him?
It can't be that
Not
if he's a
being-
prophet. And I hear what you're saying. If he's a prophet, then he should be like a scientist, so to speak. I am delivering a message from God. Here it is. Okay, I'm not supposed to be necessarily, if God tells me, go to Nineveh and make sure they do tshuva. Okay, you got to go to Nineveh and make sure they do tshuva, right? But if God says, I don't know how to say it, but you can't go out to Nineveh and say, you know what, God told me this city will have a volcano, and I don't know, and unicorns will come from the sky if you don't do tshuva. I don't know, whatever, right? You cannot come up over dramatize if God didn't give you those specific instructions.
We mentioned last time, and we learned this early on, that the Navi has to have a guiding, like a Sara Novim.
Right, this is a continuation of that.
Right, he's going to hold their hands and make sure that they don't deviate, not necessarily purposefully, but just they're able to hold the wheel and drive in the right direction. Otherwise, the wheel is going to be spinning. They're going to think that they're holding the wheel and
right.
just going off the cliff.
Right. That's what he's driving at. That was like the foreshadowing to this.
Right. So it could be
story.
that he took the false premise and just ran with that.
Right. Clearly,
As a
meaning it's not
clumsy
as
prophet.
black and white as we as we're trying to, we're trying to, in order for us to understand it, we got to first kind of separate the black and white within the gray, and then come back to understand how it is a little bit gray. Meaning, clearly, if you needed an overseeing prophet to help you not make a mistake, it is because it is easy to get carried away within your personal agenda while receiving the word of Hashem. Because since the word of Hashem is coming through you, you need to have total control and mastery of yourself, not to be able to get pulled in by what you would like Hashem to say over what Hashem actually did say, right? So clearly Tzidkiah ben Knano didn't have that. Meaning he wanted so much that to prove to the world that this is such a true spirit, and you Michayahu, who do you think you are to criticize? Look how much honor of God is being brought through us because we are bringing this prophecy. So he wants to do something, something. So these are the horns with which,
we all as kids have done this mistake. You've never been in such a situation where, I just remember,
I'm sure it's almost
at an early age. Like you hear your kids saying something, you run with it, and then you're so convinced that it's the truth that you make up the story of your own. Then you're convinced that it's the truth. It's part of
almost kind of reminds me of the story of Chava and Adam also, where he said don't eat and she said don't touch. That whole addition. Right. Okay, let's continue. Let's see a little more. So Vihinehu loy lumad b'darchei nevuah. Here he was not trained in the ways of the prophecy. Hamitzis, the real one, karoi properly. V'loy hivchin, and so he did not distinguish bein hasheker v'ha'emes, between falsehood and truth. V'alkein omru chachameinu zichronim levracha alav. So therefore our sages, blessed of memory, said upon him, Sha'omar ma'shaloi, because that he said that which he did not hear. So this goes back to your point, meaning it's fascinating. According to the Ramchal, who is the one who is a false prophet really in the story? It's not the 399 prophets. Okay, those guys have issues, but they are not the ikar false prophets. The main false prophet over here is only Tzidkiah ben Knano. The original guys who knew that they were kind of playing tricks the whole time, okay, that's bad, but it's not as bad. But Tzidkiah ben Knano, that's terrible. Because I would have said Tzidkiah ben Knano just revealed really that they were all terrible, that they were all messed up. These guys were just, they knew from the beginning they were lying, and so they're terrible. He didn't know from the beginning, he just extended it. So he was also terrible. They were terrible from the beginning, he was terrible towards the end, but essentially they're on the same page. Clearly, he's not saying that. Clearly, he's saying that it's only upon him that the sages said, She'omer ma'eshloi shama, that he's the epitome of a prophet who says prophecy which he did not hear. They also said prophecy which we didn't hear. I don't know why he singles out that Tzidkiah ben Knano. I would have said that the reason I said just single him out is because his words are much more, explicit in the
what was his
in the
position?
writing.
Why is he singled out? He was a chief prophet? He was the most trustworthy one? So he just volunteered to come forward and be more zealous in this situation?
Yeah.
Okay.
So v'chein omru, and they also said, Ruach novois atise, the spirit of novois, confused him, or confounded him, made him err. But in the other prophets, Ruach novois also, right? They were also, at least according to Ramchal, you could have said not, but according to the Ramchal, he clearly speaks out that the other prophets also spoke from this Ruach. Right, but it's specifically regarding Tzidkiah ben Knano that he applies this language, Ruach Novis at Isay, that it's the Ruach Novis that caused him to make a mistake. And they also said, so what should the Gemara asks, what should he have done? The Gemara answers, that he should have investigated. He should have been more careful. Right? So that's his sin, right? He should have been more careful. They who knew they were being false from the beginning, they're kind of it seems like they're less guilty than Tzidkiya Beknano, who in the beginning was confused, but because he didn't sufficiently check, he made a mistake. Kifima she'izhiru Yeshafat, just like Yeshafat warned him, she'ein shnei neviim misnabim b'signun echad, that two prophets do not prophesy in exactly the same phraseology. Right? So that should have given Tzidkiya ben Knanoi the hint that something's wrong over here. Right? So this innocent prophet made this grave error. V'hine be'emes, now really in truth, korol ha'neviim hahem ba'oisa zman, the truth is, and I don't know, I'm not quite sure why he needs to add this twist, but v'hine be'emes korol ha'neviim hahem, that these prophets happened to them, ba'oisa zman, at that time, gilu yoiser, a greater revelation from what they usually were able to obtain. Right? So they were trained Ruach HaTuma prophets, but at this particular instance, because Hashem wanted to entice novice, so then the prophetic experience that they had was for some reason more intense than otherwise they usually had. U'v'derech shoyne, and it was different, in a different way, in what they were used to. Until that's why Tzidkiya was confused. That's what made him believe that maybe, hey guys, maybe we actually got the real thing this time, you know. And so it appeared to him that this time the prophecy was real. Even though their efforts from the get-go was only directed to the tzad of Tuma. However, this was a result of a nesiba. I don't know if it's nesiba of a scheme. I don't know how to say that. It's not a scheme, but I don't know, he translated as decree, but I don't know if that's a decree. But this was Hashem's plot, right? This was caused by Hashem. As we mentioned, this is the first time they use this, I think, this language. And understand this well. Contemplate this well. Okay? So, does this make it better for us or no? Does this make it better for us or no? A little bit. Some parts are better, but some parts are still confusing. What's confusing? The fact that, again, so you see how different it is than the Radak. Again, just how different, it's a whole different world from the Radak. The Radak was saying these guys are charlatans and this and that. He's saying they're not just charlatans, they are prophets from the dark side. And they were getting some kind of a prophecy. And again, going back to your point, I don't know if I said this, right? Ruach Novoi Satise. One second, hold on. Right, I'm saying that there is a difference between the prophets and Tzidkiya ben Knano. The prophets are not considered, he doesn't call them, I don't know. The prototypical case of a prophet, false prophet is Tzidkiya ben Knano, but not the other guys. And maybe, I'm just saying maybe, especially if you're Medrash, if you're right, I'm sure you're right, that it says Vatzlach v'nosen Hashem biyad hamelech, right? Go and succeed, and Hashem will give in the hand of the king. So it does not specify which king, right? So then, listen.
The other
king. We got message from Ruach HaTuma. It's a terrible thing that we did. We spoke to the Ruach HaTuma, but the fact is, we didn't lie, right? Right?
Right.
Technically, yes.
So again, going back, he told us before, right? Remember, he said, sometimes prophecy comes in where the interpretations are only understood, the different layers of interpretations are only understood after. All of that he brought in order to foreshadow the story to us. Right?
Not the first time it happened. Like when they went against Benjamin. Who should go first? You gotta go.
Yeah, right.
Like he didn't say you're going to win. Just go. You wanna go? Go. Is there the prophets? No, go.
All right. So, yeah. Again, it's a little bit complicated because he also told us that when a prophet receives his prophecy, it is the most clear, unmistakable message that could possibly be received.
But that was the difference. Those they at least knew that was something fishy. This one couldn't see the difference with based on the real one.
Right.
So that one was untrained who became false prophet because he was untrained. He was too enthusiastic, add up few things. This one became false prophet.
Right, but what leaves Ramchal's good. So far, Ramchal's pieces are starting to, the way he sees it, is starting to come together. However, there's still the main question remains unanswered: why in the world is Hashem sending a false spirit?
Just to demonstrate an example when you getting some in the war, but if you train person, you know if it's real or not. If you're not trained, you get easily confused and then it's that thing.
You see, had there been better prophets, this never would have happened, and he would have never gone to war, and everything would have been fine.
But I think this whole story it's secondary. The main point is to see what happened when a person not trained enough, or not to see the different, what it leads to. It just happened to be a story of Ahab, but it's still secondary.
Okay, I don't know. I'm not sure. Okay, what's the time? Oh, okay, so that's it. Stop here.